Welcome to Hooked on TBucket Hot Rods. This podcast is all about TBuckets, their hot rod history, the people who built them in the past, as well as those who are building and enjoying them today. You're going to learn the rich history of TBuckets, and you'll discover tips and tricks on their construction, as well as the fun of owning, driving, and being a member of the active, growing, and global TBucket hot rod community. We do it with fascinating interviews of the movers, shakers, and history makers in the TBucket world that will entertain, educate, encourage, and inspire you as a TBucket owner, builder, buyer, or just a fan. And you'll be glad to know it's all absolutely free. I'm your host, John Moorhead, and I may be familiar to some of you because for 10 years now, I've been the guy behind the TBucketPlans.com website. But if you're new here, you may ask, what's a TBucket? The short answer is a hot rod roadster based on a 1915 to 27 Model T Ford style body. But there are also TBuckets based on Chevy, Dodge, Willys, Studebaker, and other bodies of the teens and 20s, including home fabricated ones and a few mongrels you'll discover along the way. Hey, we're not elitist when it comes to TBuckets. Our focus also includes coupes, sedans, tourings, and C-cabs as well. If it's got the basic TBucket elements, we're a fan and hope you will be too. But that's a subject for an episode in itself. For a quick historic perspective, the roots of TBuckets go back to the earliest days of Model Ts. By 1927, 15 million Model Ts had been built, and that helped spawn the speed equipment industry. You see, in the 1930s, it was possible to hop up a four-cylinder Model T engine to produce 7 times its original 20 horsepower. And because of their light weight, which became even lighter when you cast off the fender's hood and other unnecessary items, Model Ts were the most popular cars in every type of racing. Jump ahead a quarter century to 1957, when television was just starting to become popular, but the large format weekly photo journal Life magazine was almost just as important. Back then, there were some 50 million U.S. households, and Life circulation was about 10 million, so it was read in roughly 1 out of 5 homes in the U.S. So when the late Norm Grabowski's eye-popping TBucket Roadster was featured in a full-page Life magazine photo, it sparked a creative hot rod desire in tens of thousands of baby boomers who may have never even seen or thought about a hot rod before then. The same year, Tommy Ivo's equally legendary TBucket was featured in the movie Drag Strip Girl, as well as in 1959's The Ghost of Drag Strip Hollow. Shortly after its Life magazine exposure, Norm's TBucket started appearing in the popular television series 77 Sunset Strip, which ran from 1958 to 1964. By 1960, 90% of American households had televisions. The exposure was huge, and the TBucket hot rod phenomenon had taken off with the introduction of Cal Automotive's fiberglass TBucket bodies. Which brings us to what is and why a TBucket podcast. I'm betting that for many listeners, this is your first podcast listening experience. That's because street riding is a hobby that demographically skews more to the baby boomer generation, of which I'm a member. And to be honest, I only listened to my first podcast less than 2 years ago. I'd taken up walking for daily exercise and listened to music on my phone while doing that. But my music tastes are also kind of old and limited like my hot rod tastes, and I got bored after hearing all of my Skinner and Bad Company tunes umpteen times. So when I explored what the Podcasts app on my iPhone was, I was hooked. You see, I've been interviewing legendary and current TBucket builders for over 10 years now. From my interview notes, I'd publish stories about them on my blog at TBucketPlans.com, but I'm not a trained journalist or professional writer, and I always had the nagging feeling that I wasn't able to properly convey some of the really great stories that were shared with me. Now, what could be better than recording and actually sharing those interviews directly with other TBucket fans? Also, since I've been interviewing TBucket pioneers, We've lost a number of them that I had the pleasure of speaking with. Not just Norm Grabowski, but also influential builders like Marty Holman, Ted Brown, Don Kendall, Gary Glenn, Bud Lang, and others. That emphasized the fact that we need to capture more of these TBucket pioneers' words of wisdom to inspire generations to come. Anyway, a podcast is quite simply a free audio program that you can listen to on demand, meaning whatever you want. It can be when you're at home, in the car, commuting to work, on the treadmill at the gym, doing yard work, or wrenching in the garage. I won't bore you with any more details now, but if you'd like to learn more, check out the show notes for this episode at our podcast website, TBucketPodcast.com. That's TBucketPodcast.com. And some of you may already be on that site listening to this episode. You don't need to have a smartphone to listen to our upcoming episodes because we'll be posting them on our website at TBucketPodcast.com. But you'll also want to be sure to subscribe. Why? Well, by subscribing to this podcast, you'll automatically receive the latest episodes downloaded to your computer, phone, or other portable device. And again, it's free. Actually, this podcast has been over a year in the making, and you may wonder why. Well, research has shown that quite a few podcasts fail, and most that do don't make it past the 7th episode. I didn't want this podcast to fail, so I traveled all over the country interviewing what you'll find are the most significant and interesting TBucket builders, owners, and enthusiasts. I've got a solid 40 interviews in the can, and now you'll hear not one but 2 new ones every week when you subscribe, and it's all free. That's what's also wonderful about podcasts. So subscribe today, and in the coming weeks, here's just a taste of what you'll be able to hear that will entertain, educate, encourage, and inspire you to embrace the fascinating world of TBucket hot rods. How about Tommy Ivo discussing how he built his hugely influential TBucket? You'll also hear the cam father, Ed Iskandarian, tell about how he built his fabulous T-Roadster in the 1940s that still exists the way it was originally built. And did you know that Big Daddy Don Gartlitz had a 27 T-Roadster that was the basis for his first real rail job dragster? Although I never had a chance to record a conversation with Norm Grabowski before his passing, you'll be fascinated to hear my interview with the artist Von Franco, who's built what's known as the best recreation of Norm's Kooky T, and also a spot-on recreation of his earlier Lightning Bug version of the T-Roadster. So be sure to join us as we take a deep dive into TBucket hot rod history, building tips and tricks, events, and some incredible TBucket stories that will truly entertain, educate, encourage, and inspire you as a TBucket owner, builder, buyer, or just fan. Thanks for listening, and be sure to go to TBucketPodcast.com to subscribe so you won't miss a single episode.